safe space. We ain't never give a reason you should hide. Compile all your questions, we're taking the quest. Join Tarsha on this journey to discover the rest. Go.
Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarsha Smith, and thank you for joining us on another journey, another week, another journey. Real quick, before I get started, don't forget to go over to Patreon, get your workout on, get your vegan recipes, all that, all things Tarsha over there. But we have another adoptee in the building, family. I'm so excited to talk to Dakotah. Hi, Dakotah.
Hi. Very excited to be here. Hey. All right. So I'm just going to get started if that's okay with you.
I want to jump right in.
Perfect.
Yeah, and my very first question that I love to ask everybody, well, I have two. Number one, are you a transracial adoptee?
No.
Meaning, were you adopted outside of your race? Okay. And then number two, how old were you when you found out that you were adopted?
I always knew. I was an older adoptee, so I always knew that I was adopted.
Oh, an older adoptee. Okay.
Yes.
So were you in foster care?
Yes, I was. For 2 years.
Okay. For 2 years.
Yeah.
Do you have any memory of your birth parents?
Yes, I do. I was 5 when I was put in the system. So I actually had a lot of, I kind of associate them with trauma bonded memories, just because I know that a lot of people don't really remember stuff before that, but I have spoken to my biological mother, and a lot of the memories that I believed that I had, she confirmed were true, which is really cool that like I was able to remember stuff. But I remembered stuff about my mom. Like one time we were in, when I was visiting her for visiting or during foster care, and we went on a bridge. It was actually the last time that I saw her, and we were at a park. We went across a bridge, and I had this favorite hairpiece that I absolutely loved. Like I loved this thing, and I remember it fell off my head and into the water, and I started crying, like having a complete meltdown. I was so upset that my favorite hairpiece was gone. And I remember my mom saying, "Oh, it's okay. Like now the fish can wear it." So that's one of my favorite memories, is that she was very comforting. She's like, "It's okay. Now the fish can look pretty and they're going to wear it and they're going to look nice." So that was one thing that made me really happy. Yes. But I have lots of memories before that. Not all are happy, but you know.
Yeah. Do you remember, or would you want to share why you were put into the system?
There was actually a news article written about one of the reasons I was put into foster care, which is very interesting, on the Orlando Sentinel. And from what I remember personally, sorry, my cat. I remember the reason and believing the reason that I was taken was because we had a refrigerator out on our front lawn. Because we had no electricity. We had no, we were eating fine, but we had no electricity. We had no water. We, like I said, we had stuff on our front lawn, including a refrigerator. And that's one of the reasons that I believed we were put into the foster care. But a lot of the reasons they said in the paper was, we were covered in bug bites. We looked malnourished, and we looked like we hadn't seen the sun in days, and we were just in a dark home, no power, no electricity, like I said. So that's the reason that one of the neighbors actually called, and I found out later it was a friend of my biological mother's, who called, and she reported that we were not being taken care of. And so that's when we were taken. It was me, and I have 2 biological half brothers. So we were put in foster care. That's why I keep saying we. I feel like I should have stated that beforehand, but so yes.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. Do you remember the transition? Like they come in, do you remember the day they came and took you?
So yes, I do.
Memory for you.
Yeah, I remember we had stairs going up to like a porch in front of the house, and I was sitting on the stairs, and they came. I don't remember obviously the conversation that happened, but I knew that they were going to take me and my brother's away. And I remember telling my mom, like, please don't let them take me. Like, please don't let them take me. And crying. And she was on the phone with my biological grandmother, and she was saying, they're taking the kids. And she was in hysterics and crying, and she kept apologizing. And she's like, I'm sorry, baby. Like, I know. And they put us in a car, and they actually separated the three of us, like, immediately. I went to a girl's home, and my other two brothers went into two different homes. So the three of us were completely separated, like, right off the get-go, basically.
So they take you from your home and then separate you from your siblings.
Yep.
That first night must have been awful.
It definitely
as a
was.
5-year-old.
Those were my baby brothers, and that's all I had known. And especially being put into a girls' home, I remember very specifically, the girls were very mean. One of the memories that I have is wanting to play Barbies with them and going up, and they're like, no, you can't play Barbies. Like, you're too ugly. Like, you can't play with them. And so I wasn't allowed to play Barbies with all the other girls. And I had to go find something else to do on my own. Thankfully, I did make a friend there. I do remember. And we actually ended up getting in a lot of trouble because we were playing and we put lotion all over the floors, and we're scrubbing lotion on the hardwood floors. It wasn't carpet, thankfully, but hardwood floors. We're like pretending like we're little Annie or whatever, scrubbing the hardwood floors with lotion. And I remember my adoptive parents were so mad, and they just put me in timeout, put both of us in timeout. And they started yelling at us in Spanish because they were Hispanic. And I remember being so confused and like, I don't know what to do right now. But we had to sit on that couch for hours. So
okay, so the girls' home, and then the fostered. Okay, so you went to the girls' home, and how long did you stay in that girls' home?
Not very long. I can't remember specific dates, but I didn't stay very long because my youngest or middle brother, he wasn't sleeping at night. He wouldn't sleep. He wouldn't eat. All he wanted to do, he kept crying and saying that he wanted us, me and his younger brother.
Yeah.
And he was very upset. So they were like, well, we messed up. Like, we need to put them back together, the foster home. And that's where I ended up staying for the rest of my time with him. And so we transferred over there. And then I think a day or two later, my youngest brother transferred over, and he was only 1 at the time, I believe, maybe a little bit younger, but he was very young. So, and my other brother was, let me see, 2, I think. Yeah, 2. He was 2. So it's a 1 and a 2-year-old. Yeah. Well,
I'm glad they were able to put all of you together because they never should have separated you. But I digress because I know how those. That's another podcast.
Yeah, that was one thing that upset me. But yeah, from then on, I kind of raised my brothers in the foster home because.
Okay, so tell me about this new. Now you've moved from the girls' home to this foster home, which is now going to be your permanent home. Tell me about life in this now new space. This is now space number 2.
Yes. So, unfortunately, it wasn't.
And are you still 5? Hold on, let me ask you this: are you still 5?
Sorry.
Or have you had a birthday? Are you still 5 years old, or have you had a birthday yet?
I believe I'm still 5 years old. I had 2 birthdays in that home. But yes.
Okay, tell me about that home.
So they were very. They smoked a lot, drank a lot. They had 3 kids of their own. One was a teenager. I believe he was about 15, 16, like in that age range. And then they had a daughter who was about my age, I think, maybe like a year younger. And then a son that was slightly, I think, a year or 2 older than her. So he was about a year older than me, I think. And they did not like.
Sorry, hold on. Did you say they smoked a lot and drank a lot, but these are foster parents?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard you say.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they weren't the greatest. I feel like they were kind of in it for the monthly check from the state, but I mean,
for sure. And did I also hear you say just a little bit back? Are these the Hispanic parents?
No, that was my
okay. We haven't girls' home. Okay,
yeah, sorry,
I'm with you. Okay, so smoking and drinking. I'm ready.
So which wasn't better. I mean, my birth mom, she did smoke and drink a lot. She was young, though. She had me at 16. So I had a very young biological mom, but she was doing stuff she wasn't supposed to. So it wasn't different from what I had been used to, if that makes any sense. I kind of knew how to handle all that. They did not like their middle son. They were very abusive toward him. I remember at one point the dad picked him up by his throat and slammed him against the wall, and started screaming in his face. And this kid was, I'd say, like 6 or 7. He wasn't old enough to be obviously there's never an age where you should be picked up, but he's not even, he's still a child.
The look of confusion on my face is because what I keep hearing is somebody said it was okay for these people to be foster parents.
Yeah.
Let's let them go get more kids.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Well, they even got another kid during our stay too, and he was a baby. So they had 4 foster kids and 3 kids of their own. And this is inside of, I think it was like a double wide trailer. It wasn't very big. They had lots of property, but it wasn't big at all. Not enough for 7 kids.
Wait.
Yeah.
Is anybody coming any social worker, anybody coming to check on you guys?
A couple of times. I don't remember them coming.
Or is it like when they come, then they straighten up?
Basically, yeah. I remember one time the social worker came because my middle brother, he had an allergic reaction. He was allergic to strawberries, and I knew he was allergic to strawberries, and I told them not to feed him strawberries, and they fed him strawberries anyway. And he had an allergic reaction to it. So obviously the social worker had to come in and make sure that everything was okay. But I remember being absolutely like in tears, like completely beside myself, because my little brother is having an allergic reaction to something that I told them not to give him because he is allergic to it. But they didn't believe me because I was 5. So obviously I didn't know anything because I'm a kid.
5.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So they had to take him to the hospital and everything. And I mean,
oh yeah. So hospital, and then people are going to get involved because now we're at the hospital. What happened?
Exactly. But nothing happened. They were just like, oh, it's a mistake. Like it was an honest mistake. And then we all that he came back, and that was the end of that situation. But yeah, they were really weird too. They had lots of animals. They had 3 dogs, big dogs, and I think 2 to 3 cats. And I remember one of them being a Dalmatian. Yeah, they have, it's a zoo in this house at this point. And like I said, it's not very big.
That's why I'm laughing, because I'm like, I'm envisioning, you just keep piling on all the things and animals and what's, it's a lot going on. Somebody was like, these people.
Yep. These are the people that we should give the kids
These are the people.
I mean,
who are the people that said these are the people? That's
what I want to know. That's what I've been wondering for these past years. Who are these people? Because I don't know. They had this one Dalmatian, and I remember him being kept behind a baby gate, and there was kind of a baby gate, and then there was this little area, and then behind it was their room, but they kept their door closed, and then they had like an outside door to the porch that you could go out. But this area was no bigger than a shower, like the bottom of a shower.
For a Dalmatian?
For a Dalmatian. But he was sickly too. He was skin, bones, like he looked like he had not eaten. He was sick. And they kept him separated from their other 2 dogs. And I remember eventually, and I loved that dog so much. I mean, it scared me a little bit with the skin and bones, because I've never liked feeling bones on anybody. Like I can't even touch my own clavicle. Like that's the point I don't like. And, but I loved that dog. And I remember he was gone one day, and I asked what happened. I said, "Where's Blue?" And they were like, "Well, he died." And I was like, "Oh, well, where?" Because they buried their animals on their property. Because like I said, it was a really big property. So, I mean, it was fine to bury your animals there. But I was like, I want to go put flowers on his grave. Like, I loved that dog. Like, where can I go do that? Where's his grave? And I remember them telling me, and I think I remember this because it's so weird, and even I knew it was weird at 5-6 years old. And they were like, "No, we're not going to tell you where his grave is because we don't want you to dig him up." And I was like, why would I dig up a dog?
What?
And I
Yeah,
remember
something
thinking
else
how
going on.
stupid they were to think that I, a 5 or 6 year old, A, could even pick up a shovel and
A
start digging.
shovel.
And B, why would I want a dead dog? Like, it's not alive. What am I supposed to do with a dead dog?
There are red flags everywhere
Yes.
with these
Oh, yes.
people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
But, and
girl.
they,
And we still at 5 and 6 years old. We
yeah,
haven't even
exactly.
got
We
that.
haven't even scratched the surface. We haven't even gotten
We
to
haven't
the
even
adopted side. We're still in this mess.
we're still in this mess. The foster system is wild. And oh, God
I
bless you, babies that have had to go through some of this stuff.
I've always
And
hated the
these
foster
people.
system. And people will, I got pregnant very young. I was 19 and I didn't know, like, I had so many things I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I remember my now fiance, he telling me there's always adoption. And I said, adoption is not an answer. I refuse to put my child in a foster care system because my thought is, what if he has something wrong with him, like a defect? He goes to the system. I've seen infants, I've seen babies go to the system. I lived with one that was there. And my thought is, at 19 years old, I can't do that to my child. Like, I grew up in that and I grew up with that. Obviously, I ended up keeping my son after lots of consideration and thought, but and I know there is private adoption, but that also scared me because of my adoptive parents. They were not the greatest people, and so it scared me giving him to somebody that I don't know, and so that was like something really hard for me. I've always hated the system, and that was never. I always said, for me at least personally, adoption is not an option. Like, I will not put my child through what I went through because that's not. I cannot in good conscience put any human through what I went through. Obviously there's a lot of great adoption stories, and I've met adoptive parents who are amazing. Like, it made me cry because of the treatment that their child was getting that I wish that I would have gotten in the system. But I also know that that's 1 in a million. And there are so many more bad, foster parents than there are good foster parents. Which is the most terrifying thing. But yeah.
So I'm going to turn the corner here. So take me, how old were you when you get to, when you be, I can't even talk, when you get adopted? How old are you?
I was 7. So
now we're new set of people, another
yes.
home.
Yeah.
Are your brothers adopted with you?
Yes, they were adopted with me. So we were able to stay together, which was really good. And a lot of people don't want a 7-year-old, especially. The boys were always looked at least from what I was told, they were looked at by a couple of other people. But when they told them that, we were a package deal and they saw me, they're like, oh, well, we don't want a 7-year-old. We don't want a 6-year-old. Like, we want an older, or we want a younger child or children. So yes, we were lucky to be adopted together, thankfully. But at that point, it wasn't really an option for me to let them, like, if they had a better home that was set up for them, then of course, like, I would want them to be put in like be adopted. But I had raised those boys. Like, I was told when I was 6, my 6th birthday, you're old enough now to raise them. You're going to raise them. And I put them to bed. I gave them baths. I taught my youngest brother how to walk. I did all the motherly things.
Did you say at 6 somebody told you were old enough?
Yes, like they're your responsibility.
You just learned how to tie your shoes.
Yeah, I didn't know how to tie my shoes until I was 8.
But I just learned how to tie my shoes.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tie my shoes, but I need to take care of these other people.
Yeah.
Proceed. It's just like, what is happening?
And that was my foster mother who sat me down. She sat me down to have this conversation with me. Like, you were old enough.
She sat you down at 6
to take care of them.
Said you are old enough.
Yeah. And I remember one night, her daughter was, I did not like her daughter. Her daughter was a little deviant, and she went into their room one night and woke them up. I had just put them down to sleep. Like, it was time to go to bed. I remember sitting in the living room on the floor, and I was eating something and watching Family Guy. And the boys come out, and she comes out first, and then the boys come out, and they had just woken up. And I remember being so upset with her, and I couldn't yell at her. I couldn't be mad at her. I just had to walk past her and pick my brothers up and go put them back to bed, because that was my job, to go put them to sleep. And so I went and put them to bed again. But yeah, and she didn't get in trouble for it
And
either.
you said the parents were in the bed, or at least in the room?
They were in the living room. Yeah. So it was, the parents were in the living room. The oldest brother was in the living room from their kid. And then I was sitting in the living room. And then their middle son was asleep.
But the 6-year-old is putting little people to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Take me to the adoptive parents' house, because I'm tired over here.
Yeah. So I was
this house. Let's go to the new house.
Oh, just wait. Yeah. So I was adopted.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. We haven't even gotten to the bad parts yet. But yes, so I was adopted when I was 7. And I still have pictures actually on my phone from like the first day like we met and we were officially adopted. I remember I spent Christmas with them that year before I was officially adopted, because they were, doing the trial run to make sure that, we would fit in with the family, because they also had a son that they had previously adopted, which was 2 years younger than me. So they wanted to make sure we all meshed well. So everything went fine. And I remember and we were adopted. I remember there being lots of times where they would tell me that I needed to back off and stop being the mom to my youngest brothers, but I didn't know how to do that. That wasn't something like I kind of lost myself at that point. At 7 years old, I didn't know how to be a kid. Yeah. I mean, I was like, I'm like the mother figure. Like they come to me when they're upset, because that's who they know is me. And like, I don't know what else to do with myself. Like at that point, I remember crying myself to sleep every night because I missed my biological mother. And I was a mommy's girl, like full blown. I loved my mom. Like she was my best friend. And it was really hard, because I realized really quickly and confirmed later on that like, oh, this family, like they want me to be a daddy's girl. But I was like, men weirded me out. They always had. My mother had never had a stable relationship. The last stable relationship she was in, she was getting beaten and abused. And these are my biological brother's father. And she was running over to the neighbor's house to call the cops on him. Like that was the last stable relationship my mother had. So I didn't have this comforting male figure in my life. I never had. So to be kind of pushed into this role of, you're a daddy's girl now, get attached to him, was really rough. Especially because my adoptive mother was always, she loved boys and she always wanted boys, and she was a tomboy growing up. So she wanted to get really close to the boys, and they wanted me to get really close to my adoptive father, which was really, really hard on me. But they didn't really see it, I guess, and I didn't know how. I didn't want to vocalize it.
Just I'm just trying to understand, how do you take children and say, okay, now you get close to this one, and I'm going to get close to this one.
Exactly. Exactly. And all I wanted was to be really close to my adoptive mother. That was always like, I just wanted another mom figure to attach to.
Instead of putting your best interest, she was looking out for her.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know, from that point on, I kind of was forced to be in a close relationship with my adoptive father. And I started growing up, and there was obviously like, regular rough childhood points, but it wasn't anything like really bad. But as I started maturing and getting older, my adoptive father started molesting me. So then, at that point I was, I think I was about 12 or 13.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of easy to see it when they're forcing a relationship on you. But I didn't want to say anything at, 12, 13, or I blocked out a lot of memories of stuff that happened, especially during that time and specific time frames, just from trauma and trying so hard to forget that you do. You really do. You have blanks in your memories. But yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yes, so at that age, I didn't want to tell anybody because I was like, if I tell somebody, my brothers are going to be taken out of this home. And from my point of view, I was like, they're not being hurt. I don't want them back in the system. I don't care what happens to me, but they will take them. And I can't let them be taken from the only stable family that they actually know. Like they remember, they don't remember our biological mom or anything that happened because they were too little, or they don't remember foster care. Like they remember little snippets, but the good stuff, which is what I wanted them to remember, is the small good moments we had in that home. But I did not want them going back into the foster homes. I couldn't take that. And I knew I would live off the guilt. Like, oh, it's my fault that they're in this situation. Although I know now, like if that would have happened, it wasn't my fault. But yeah, so
to your knowledge, did your adoptive mom know?
Not to my knowledge. She never really said anything. Oh, sorry, my son. She never really said anything, but I don't know. She always let me go out, and she would, you know, if I wanted to do something or go out of town for something, she would be like, oh, have your dad take you. Or, you know, she would go away for business trips because they owned a business, and he would tell me, oh, well, I don't like to sleep alone. Like, I'm lonely. Like, come cuddle with me or come do this. And then if I didn't and I said no, he would make me feel like I was the worst person. He would stop talking to me. He would not, like, I would tell my mother, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm getting older. Like, it's not comfortable. And she'd be like, oh, well, it's fine. Don't make a big deal out of it. If you don't want to do it, just do or don't do it. And I was like, but then he's not going to talk to me, and he's not going to like, you're like, she never got me the stuff that I needed, or like she would, but to an extent, if that makes any sense, like bare minimums. Like if I wanted to do anything, it needed to go through him. And so I wouldn't be able to do any of the stuff, especially before I got my license. I wouldn't be able to go anywhere. I would have to sit in that house. He would like glare at me. I would have to do extra chores. I would have to do all, and he would scream at me. And I was like, all of this stuff is going to happen if I say no. And she's like, well, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, just make a decision for yourself. And I was like, okay. Like, I guess
now,
I don't really have
hold on. Let me ask you this. Now, how is she treating the boys? Because she's very dismissive with you. Is she still super hands-on with the boys? Is their experience different?
Yeah, especially the one that was adopted before us, my younger brother that was 2 years younger. He was their first, and so he got treated a little bit differently. But, you know, that was always her favorite child. Like everybody, like we all knew, even, you know, as we got older, me and my younger brothers, and even I talked about it with him because we did get very close. Like when I first met him, I hated him, hated his guts, but we ended up becoming like best friends. We were super close. And I was like, yeah, you're definitely mom's favorite. And he was like, yeah, I know. I was like, he's like, I just wish you would stop smothering me. Like, I was like, yeah, well, be grateful. But yeah, so he was definitely her favorite, but she still was very, like, you know, involved in the boys stuff. Like she would try to go to all their sports games and football games and stuff like that. Yeah. And she would make an effort at first. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is the dad, because usually, especially when boys start getting into sports and stuff, is the dad not like being a boy dad, if you will, or is he so focused on you?
He did go to their games, but he didn't make an effort to try to go to every single one like my adoptive mother did. Like she really did make an effort to go. To go. Honey, he's running across the screen.
Real life, people. This is real life.
Can't get the perfect.
It's okay.
I didn't even realize she's in here with me. She's so quiet, but she did make a real effort to be at their games and do stuff with them and do things with them, which was really nice. Like she was a parent teacher, like conferences. She was the room mom for their stuff. I don't really remember her being room mom for me, but maybe when I was younger, but I really don't remember that, only because room dads really weren't a thing, you know? So yeah, she was kind of, yeah. So she was very involved in the school and everything. Both of them were very involved, and they were they were well off, so they made sure that they donated to the school. And they, as I got to high school, I made amazing friends like in high school. And they really like got me through a lot of stuff.
Because,
High
okay,
school
hold on a
was,
second, because you turned the corner
okay,
on me. Hold on a second. Hold on.
sorry, I'm
So
sorry.
now we're in high school. You're
Yes,
fine. Girl, this is your
yes.
story. I'm letting you drive. But I just got to ask. So is the behavior with your father still happening
Yes.
into high school? Oof.
Yes. And it's
Okay.
more of he would ask me to give him a hug, and I would give him a hug, and he would touch my butt or make a comment on my breast size, or even go as far as to like look at my bra, and of course touching me. And and he did this in front of my adoptive mother, and she didn't think anything about it. And he did it in front of my brothers, and they didn't think anything about it, because what are they supposed to think? This is normal behavior, for at least for the brothers. This is normal behavior. This has happened her entire life. So what are we supposed to think? My adoptive mother was just like, oh, that's just how dads act. And I was like, none of my other friends have told me like this is like,
Who's
not that
that?
I had
Oh,
at
I'm
that
sorry.
point. I don't think that's how they act,
Who-
but
That okay. She
yeah,
said that is just how dads act. Girl, bye.
he's
That
like,
is
oh,
not a thing,
he just
Mom.
loves you. He's just trying to
Dr.
give
Mom,
you
that's not
love.
a thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, if that's
She
how
was
your
in
dad
denial.
acted,
She was in
yeah,
total
denial or
denial. Look, then you need to be on somebody's couch, ma'am. That
exactly,
that's first.
exactly. No, that's
Okay, but this is not about her. This is about you. Let me come back. Let me reel myself
we
in.
can
Let me
have a
come
whole
back.
rap session about her. But yes, so
But we're not doing that today because this is about
yeah.
you. We're gonna put that to the side. Okay, so you go through high school and then you said that. Oh, okay. So here's a great question. You get pregnant early,
Yes,
and this
I got
behavior
pregnant
is
at
still going on with
18.
dad.
So actually, no, it stopped at 18 only because I had been begging for years, like begging, hands and knees, absolutely pleading to go to therapy. And I was like, I want to work through, and
Good for
I didn't want to say,
you.
yeah, it was something that I really needed. And I didn't want to obviously say that
Yeah.
I'm going for stuff that's happening in this house, because they took offense to that. Anytime that I would say anything about my adopted mother or like anything like that, like comparing or, I wasn't really allowed to talk about her. Whenever I did, they were like, she left you, she abandoned you, she didn't want you. That's not true. But
Oh, you
she,
mean your birth mother? You weren't allowed
yes,
to say
so they
anything
would
about your
tell me
birth
that my birth
mother.
mother left me, abandoned me, didn't want me, just threw me out, threw all of us out to make us feel, at least to make me feel less attached to her. So, yeah, so it stopped because I had been begging for years to go to therapy, and they finally caved, and they're like, fine, you can go to therapy. And I told them the reason I want to go is to work through some stuff that I remember from before I was adopted. And they were like, if it's really affecting you this
Mm-hmm.
much, like up to this point, like go ahead. And I had a teacher who I was very close to, and her sister was a therapist, which is one of the reasons that they let me go, because they were also very close to that teacher. So they were like, yes, we trust her, and so therefore we trust her sister. So you can go see her sister. So I went to go see her sister, and I think it was like the second session, and I remember her asking, it may have been the first actually, and she asked me, she was doing basic questions, just like get to know me, like trying to figure out what I needed help with. And one of the questions was, have you ever been touched like inappropriately? And I remember just kind of sitting there, and I don't even know how long it was. I
Oh,
disassociated at this point. I just kind of like,
yeah.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. And I kind of just looked at the ground, and she was like, okay. And she's like, by who? And I didn't want to say anything. And she was like, it's okay if you don't want to say anything, but I really want to help you. And so I think it was the next session. I was like, yeah, it was my adoptive father. He does that. And she was obviously very upset by this. But so I remember she was like, okay, well, after a couple more sessions, like, you need to tell your adopted mother what's happening. Like, you need to tell her. And she's like, if you don't, I will, because there are minors in the home. And I was like, but they're not being touched. They're not being hurt. That was my thought. But she's like, if you don't, I'm going to, because of the minors. And I remember, like, I was like, well, I don't really have an option at this point. Like, I'm not really being given an option, because my goal was at that point, get out, get to college, and that's it. You don't have to see them again, because it was my senior year too. I was like, I just have this year left. Like, I just have to go to college, and then I can be done with this entire thing. I don't have to come back. I can just say I'm done. Like, I don't have to do anything. I can keep in contact with my brothers, but, you know, I didn't have to.
Right.
I didn't ever have to see them again. I didn't ever have to spend the night. I didn't ever have to do anything that involved what was being happened or what was happening to me. But she just told me, like, if you don't tell them, I will, or tell your mother, I will. So I remember we were sitting in the car.
How'd that conversation go? I'm ready.
We were sitting in the car, and I remember my brothers being at an activity. And the reason we were sitting in, like, I brought my own car and she brought her car to drop my brothers off. And I forgot why I brought my car. I met them there for some reason, but it was for a reason. And I was like, okay, well, I guess now's as good as any time. Like, she's alone. Like, she's sitting in her car. She's doing nothing. So I remember getting into, like, the passenger seat, and I was like, Mom, I really got to tell you something. And she was like, yeah, what's up? And she's kind of still looking at her phone. And I was like, I need to talk to you. Like, we need to have a conversation, like, face to face. And she was like, okay. And she put her phone down, and I told her, I was like, this is what's been happening. And I remember she just got really quiet, and she didn't say anything. And then she was like, are you sure? Like, when was the last time this happened? And I remember my adoptive father was in Georgia, because we had a house in Georgia, and he was staying there for a few days, and I had gone up there. For some reason, I went up there for my own thing, and then I came back down and drove back down, and he was still up there. And I was like, well, like, this past time when I went up there it happened. And she was like, she didn't say anything. And she just kind of sat there in silence, and then she started crying. And I remember her saying, like, just give me a minute, I'm going to call him. So I left the car because she didn't want me in the car. And she told me later that she told him not to come back home, and that she knew what was happening. So she did kick him out of the house for a good while. Now, mind you, she stopped contacting him for a little bit, but this no contact lasted 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if that. And then she started talking to him again. And my brother started talking to him again. And they knew too, because I explained to them in minor detail, like, hey, like, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. And I had told them before my mother, because my youngest, or my brother that I was super close to, they had adopted before me. You know, he was old enough to understand, and, like, he was old enough for me to talk to about this. And I didn't talk to anybody else really about this, except for a couple of other, like, friends and stuff like that, but really close friends. But yeah, so they really didn't do anything. And finally, my adoptive mother, she was like, go ahead, you can go.
Oh, no, I wanted to know, for him to have, you know, he came right back. So it was like, I'm mad, and then he's right back. And I know this is your senior year of high school. Yeah. Are you now just like, you know what, I'm completely done. Let me just get out of here. Let me just get to college.
So he actually ended up moving into we moved my grandmother, who used to live in Tennessee. We moved her to Florida, and we bought a house for her. And he moved in with her, which was 20 minutes away from our house. So thankfully he didn't move in right away. But I remember my adoptive mother started poking holes in my story. Of course, there are holes in my story from where I have spent years saying, I don't want to think about this. I can't think about this. I just want to forget, like, let it all go away. Like, I can't remember all this stuff, the details. I don't want to remember all the details.
And that's fine. That's what the brain does to protect us.
Yes. And she never understood that. And she was like, well, if this didn't, or like, if this happened then this would have happened. And she called me a liar. And she was like, you're lying. Like, this didn't happen. You're just trying to get attention. I know she shut down for like weeks. We actually didn't even spend Thanksgiving together because she laid in bed and shut down. She didn't cook anything for anybody. I went over to a friend of mine. My adopted brother he went over to a friend of his because the younger two wanted to play video games upstairs. And I even asked them, I was like, oh, do you want to come with me? And they were like, no. I was like, okay. So she was just laying in bed. She didn't talk to me about it again, really. Like she kind of tried to, but she went to therapy with me. And she then decided after a couple of sessions of therapy, my therapist was evil and that she was the one who came up with this whole story and made me tell everybody else this whole thing. And I was like, okay, that's not what happened. But I mean, at this point,
denial is a real thing.
Yeah. I remember getting to a point where I was just so sick because I was at my therapist ended up calling DCF on my family and like them trying to open a case or whatever. And the same day that DCF got called on my family, my first boyfriend broke up with me. So I was going, and he knew too what was happening, and he decided that was the right time to end the relationship. So I was going through something like super rough mentally and just emotionally, like everything. I felt like my entire world was caving down. And I didn't know what to do. I felt like I had nobody to really lean on. I had my best friend, but that was it. And she did believe me, and her family was told, and her family actually still believes me. I still talk to them. I love them. They're like my second family. I grew up with them. But yeah, no, my brother started to go see him at my grandmother's house, and he started saying, oh, well, this is a lie. This isn't right. And one of my brothers actually saw something happen to me one night because we were all having a sleepover in my room and watching TVs and stuff like that. And he eventually convinced him, like, you didn't see anything. All I was doing was trying to grab the remote to turn the TV off. When I know for a fact the remote was down by the boys because I had given it to them before I went to sleep. So I was like, I'm going to sleep. Here's the remote. You want to change the TV? You can change it. So it was with them. And he's like, oh, I was just trying to grab the remote. Nothing happened. Like, I didn't do anything to her because he didn't know they were in the room. And they started slowly believing him. And my adoptive mother, he got to her too. And they eventually started going out on dates and started going out together. And slowly they started going to my friends, the teachers that I was closest to, going out to dinner with them and saying, she's going through a lot right now. She's kind of crazy. Like, this stuff didn't happen. And trying to convince everybody around me that it didn't happen.
That you're crazy and it didn't happen.
Yes. And so finally, my adoptive mother told me, she said, he's moving in May 1st. So you can either stay here or you can leave. And I was like, okay, I'm leaving. And I was like, I'm not going to stay here and risk my safety a second longer because you're making a decision to move him back into the house. And she's like, well, we'll put locks on your doors and everything. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm not living in the same house as him. Like, that's not happening. I'm leaving. She's like, you have nowhere to go. Because at that point, she had told all of my friends, parents and stuff like that, all the stuff that I regret doing and like bad stuff that I did. And I admit I wasn't a perfect person in that time. I was going through a lot of stuff and I was getting into stuff I shouldn't have been getting into. Yeah. But she decided to air all of my dirty laundry out to my closest friends' families. Everybody around me knew every dirty little thing that I had ever done in my life. And at that point, she was like, you don't really have anywhere to go. I was like, I guess I'll find some place. So I found a friend at work that I was working with, and they offered to let me move in with them. So I moved in with them. And at that point I had met my now fiance, and she was like, oh, well, we'll just still talk, and, you can come over and you can, do all this stuff. And I was like,
I don't have any words because this is like, really?
Yeah.
So first we're not going to believe you. Then we're going to make you think you're crazy and the boys. And then we're going to go and tell everybody that you're crazy. And we're never, ever going to acknowledge your feelings, what happened to you, or help you or try and get you help. And then sabotage the help that you were getting.
Yep. And at that point, it had been about 6 months, I'd say.
And at this point, you're 18?
Yes, I'm 18. So I'm like, I'll just move out. And at that point, they're like, I decided that it was for my healing. I needed to confront him. I had not talked to him in 6 months. All he had done was deny, deny, deny. But I did it with my therapist. And I did it. His therapist came in because they had decided at that point that therapy was amazing and that they should all get therapy. So they flipped the switches on this. Yeah. Everybody was in therapy at this point. And I was like, well, you're welcome. I kind of helped do that. But I mean, we're not going to acknowledge that. So he brought his therapist in. I was with my therapist and I wrote a letter and I confronted him. And I had written a book, actually. I wrote a book about like a poetry book about my experiences and stuff like that. And I had released it. I had published it on Amazon, and he had bought it and read it. And apparently he decided to text my mother and say that, the book was garbage, that it was terrible and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. So I wrote a letter and I just basically kind of outlined, like, you can't even acknowledge what you did to me. I was like, I am broken because of you. I have been through this much crap because of you. I didn't need this. Like, you were supposed to be my dad. You were supposed to protect me from this stuff. You weren't supposed to be you weren't supposed to be the aggressor. And he looked at me and he was like, and I was like, I am trying to heal in the best way that I know how. And one of the reasons I wrote my book was to heal and to help me get through a lot of stuff. And he was like, well, yeah, your book's crap. Like, nothing in that is true. And I'm sorry that I was what did he say? He said, I'm sorry I was such a bad dad to where I couldn't give you the attention that you needed and the affection that you needed, because he was thinking that I was just upset about him constantly verbally abusing us. And we were hit with a belt so many times, like, that was, by him. And he would do it to the point where I had bruises on my back. But that was what he was apologizing for being a bad dad for that reason. And I was like, are you kidding me?
So basically he wasn't listening.
No, he wasn't
listening to anything you were saying.
No. And his therapist clammed up because I had spoken to his therapist because his therapist was also my adoptive mother's therapist. So I had gone in with her to speak to that therapist. And I hated him right off the bat. He was very much, this is your fault, like, blaming, like, I don't believe anything you say type stuff. Like, he was very much on their side, so to speak. And I remember him just clamming up, and my therapist looked like, yeah, you really shouldn't have said any of that, because I went off. I was like, my book is the best thing that's come out since, I was like, my book is the best thing for me. I wrote that for me, and everything in that is true. Just because you can't acknowledge that and you're not an adult and you can't take responsibility for your actions and your mistakes, that doesn't mean that it's crap. And I went off on him and I started saying, like, I said everything as nastily as I could say, but respectfully as possible, if that makes any sense. So because I was I'm still not, like, I'm shaking because of how scared and like angry I am. Like, everything is just coming up. And he was like, well, I didn't say that. I didn't say your book was bad. And I was like, yeah, you did. And he looked at his therapist and he's like, did I say that? And his therapist was like, yeah, it kind of sounded like you did. And I was like, yeah, thank you. So finally you can, be on my side about something. But we had this whole conversation. It went nowhere. And I was like, we're done.
It sounds like you were just on a hamster wheel, just
talking it to a brick wall. Like, that's it. I was like, not that I was ever going to speak to you again after this, but there's no way that I'm ever going to have contact with you again. So yeah, no, that's with that. And then my adoptive mother decided to tell me, we still love you, and constantly with the we and like your father. And I was like, he's not my dad. First of all, not my dad, but I was like, I don't have a dad.
So let me ask you this. So at this point, how long have you, are you still no contact with them?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm still no contact with them.
And how long has it been?
I'd say about 2 years.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually had to contact.
And is your life more peaceful?
For sure. I always get little mini heart attacks whenever I get a, text or phone call or something like that. I did block. I ended up having to cut off contact with my brothers as well, because they said some really nasty stuff
Oh,
about me when they found out I was pregnant, and I couldn't have my son around them as they were. And I'm open to talking to them again and having a relationship with them again, but I also know that they need to, in the nicest way possible, grow up. They need to mature and become adults. And at that point, I think we can have an adult conversation, because they were all still minors and under the age. Um,
okay.
and I
And
just
still
feel
very
like,
much under the influence of your parents.
yes, exactly. We all
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of growing up and a lot of maturing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm open to that at some point, but right now the first thing that I thought, because at that point I found out that I was pregnant, and my thought was my kid, like they're
Right.
saying extremely hateful stuff to my face. Imagine what they would say behind my back to my kid. I will not let them hear that their mother is a whore and say all this other nasty stuff. Like, that's not something that I'm ever going to let my kid hear. And also, like, who is it to say that they don't give away my location to, my adoptive parents and tell them where I'm living, or tell them to come visit the baby? Because at that point I was like, they're not having any contact with my kids. Like, that's it. You're not grandparents to my children. Any child that I have from this point on, like, you don't
Right.
mean anything to them. You will never meet them. I wouldn't even go to, because I needed to get my license, my car tags switched over to me. And I didn't want to go because I thought that my adoptive father was going to be there. And my thought was, I don't even want the baby hearing his voice, like from the outside, like from the
Wow.
womb. I was like, I
Wow.
don't even want my
From the
baby
womb.
recognizing him in any way, shape, or form. Like, there's going to be no contact at all with my child. Because at that point they had found out I was pregnant,
Mm.
and it wasn't even by me. They found through the insurance, and her first thing was, oh, we're praying for you.
Gotcha.
We still love you. And I was like, we is too many people, A. And B, I was like, I don't, like, we're not doing this. No, they tried to keep contact with me after my son was born. She texted me, and she knew I had another insurance for my child. And she's like, that insurance isn't enough. You're going to need a second one. So send me over his social security number. And I was like, if you really think you're getting my
I will
child's
not.
social security number,
I will not. I
I
will
was
not.
like, no. She
I
didn't
will
contact me
not.
throughout my pregnancy. No, she didn't contact me throughout my pregnancy. She didn't ask how I was doing. I remember one time she butt dialed me, and I thought, we hadn't called in a while. I was like, something must be happening with the boys for her to be calling me. I was like, I need to call her back. So I called her back, and she was like, oh, it was accidental. I meant to call this person. And she's like, yeah. And we didn't really have a conversation. We just hung up, and we're like, okay. And she didn't ask about the baby at that point. None of them really, other
But
than
now
one of my
you want me to
brothers.
send his
Yeah, send my
his
kid's
social.
social security number. Um,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, okay, sounds good. Not happening. But yeah, so I cut off contact with them, and I haven't spoken to them. I mean, I had to text her the other day, which is really bad. I've been putting it off for a while, but I want to get married this year, and I need my birth certificate to do so.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I need my birth certificate to do that. And also my passport. It's
Right.
just easier to get my passport and then get it renewed, instead of making a whole new passport, explaining what happened to it to the government. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to text her. So I spent a week, panic attacks. I had acne breakouts. My entire scalp was covered in scabs from where I had been picking at it from my anxiety, because I knew that I had to do this because it's the quickest way. Because
Oh my
where I
goodness.
was born, the New York departments are backed up for about 6 to 8 months. So I wouldn't be able to get married this year if I ordered it from them, which at this point might be the only
Mm-hmm.
thing that we can do. But I texted her, and I was like, I need my birth certificate and my passport. And I had her send it. I'm going to have her send it to my best friend's house if she ever responds. But yeah, no, she still kept trying to contact with me, and she sent me over new insurance, and they moved states and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know why you even think you should send me this insurance, because even if I'm still in Florida, you're in this state. And that insurance is not going to work with Florida. I don't know what you expect me to do at this point. But I have my own insurance. So I was like, I don't know why, but yeah.
Okay, but okay, so here we go. Okay, so we're going to focus on Dakotah. How is Dakotah doing today?
It's been rough. I will say that. Today specifically, I've been kind of, a little bit anxious about this. It's been a really long time since I've told my entire story from front to finish, at least with that chapter of my life. But yeah, but overall, I'm doing a lot better now that they're not in my life, and I am a lot happier. And I think one of the more difficult parts that I've had is parenting, because of the way that I was parented throughout my life, and trying not to parent my child the way that I was, trying to end that cycle, and like continue ending cycles, because that's, at this point, seems like what my whole life has been, continuing to end cycles. But I have contact with my birth mother, and we're actually very close, and she's the grandmother to my child, or to my son. So she is grandma. We go to visit her, and I found out I have a brother and sister from her. So it's been a journey, for sure. And I don't know. I remember the first day she texted me, I started crying, and I was bawling in tears, because I was like, this is what I wanted for so long. And now, like, she actually wants to talk to me.
Yeah.
I might actually have a mom, but yeah. So that was, yeah.
That's a moment. That was a moment.
Yeah.
So, in my final question for you, if you had to say anything at all to the little girl or little boy that's in foster care right now, what would your word be to them?
I guess I'd say this is a hard one. It may not always be easy, and it may not always go your way. Life may not. But in the end, you're going to be so happy. And it doesn't matter if you get adopted or you don't, you still have the decision to make your own life. And it doesn't matter what family you get put in. You can create your own family, and they're going to be the most important people to you in the world. My family that I created that's everything to me. So it doesn't matter, in the end, what your family is like. You get your own, you get to make friends, and you get to meet somebody and maybe have kids if that's the way that you want to go. Like, it's not set in stone. Your family does not define you, basically. But yeah.
Oof. I want to thank you for coming and telling the hard story. I know that was hard.
Yeah.
But there is somebody out there listening that needed to hear that. You're going to help somebody, because that's what this is all about. This is why I do what I do, because I understand there are all kinds of people. We never know who's listening, ever.
Yeah.
And if we can help one person, then mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And you're definitely going to do that.
Yeah. I always say, if I help one person with my story, then everything that I've been through is absolutely worth it. That somebody else gets to be helped.
Absolutely worth
stuff
it.
that I've been through. But yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
The truth of it is, you're welcome. The truth of it is, when we go through things, it's never for us. It's always for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility to, at some point, be able to open our mouths and tell our stories.
Yes.
So kudos to you for doing that today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And on that, hang on, Dakotah, don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And on that note, bye, family.
Journey on. You need a pie with the good. Oh yeah, what is the one?